There we go. Okay. I think we're doing it now. Just a moment behind.
Okay.
Not a big deal. So, to answer your question though, Arielle, as we get started, you would be able to see questions from people if you also have the Facebook Live going,
Okay.
which you are absolutely welcome to do. Oh, we're live. It might create a little bit of double speak for you on
I'll
your
just keep
end.
it off. If
Okay.
there are questions, you can just ask them to me and we can do it that way.
Okay. Totally cool.
All right. Great.
All right. So I'm gonna put this down. I'm getting situated here. Excellent. I think we're there, which is really exciting. So looks like we already have 2 people watching. I think that's a plus. We're still building momentum. So
We're famous.
Hi, anyone watching. Welcome to this week's episode of So Ask Us at the Mill District. I'm Hannah. I'm the Director of Placemaking for the Mill District. And I'm talking today to Arielle Jessop, which I'm super excited about. So for anyone who doesn't know, Arielle is an amazing artist, local artist, actually grew up in North Amherst, which we're going to talk about a little bit at some point. And she's also our first artist in residence in the Mill District, helping us hammer out what that even means, what it could mean. And she just started on a public art installation as well, which we will also talk about and be tracking on our Mill District Facebook page as it takes shape. So Arielle, thank you for doing this. I'm super pumped to talk with you in this capacity. How are you? How's your day going?
I'm doing okay. I'm back in the studio after not being able to be here for a few weeks as all of us navigate this new terrain. So it's nice with sort of restrictions starting to be lifted, we're allowed to be back in our spaces.
So they shut everything down.
A giant, yeah, not technically, but we all sort of agreed that we would try to not come into space where we were all touching doorknobs and things like that. So they've just kind of lifted that. We still wear masks in the building, but it's sort of a little bit more socially acceptable to be here now. So it feels really cool to be back in my space. Yeah, which is fun. So it's a little, one step closer to normalcy.
Yeah, right. Can you show us your space a little bit since you're in there?
Sure, yeah. So let me do a little flip here. Whoops. There we go. So this is my space, me tools. It's my door. I have my little like bistro lights on to give me some ambiance.
Nice. And your studio is in the Cottage Street Studios in East Hampton, is that right?
Cottage Street Studios in East Hampton. Yeah. Paints. My very organized. That looks much more organized than I ever am, but it's a good image thing. And current work in progress. Yeah, exactly. So that's my space, my little table, my little drafting table. So it's nice to be back.
Yeah. And you mentioned like feeling like you're getting a little bit back to normal, but how have the last few weeks been? Have you been making art? Have you taken a break from it? Like, how has all of this sort of impacted your work?
It's a good question. You know, I personally have continued making art. I think creatives really kind of oscillate between like spurts of creativity and then also taking time to rest and rebuilding kind of what you're thinking about making, what's affecting you, what you want to move towards next. And so I think periods like this, I think artists, I'll speak for myself, as an artist myself, I really kind of thrive on periods of dormancy because there's kind of this ebb and flow of creative energy and then sort of restoring and creative energy. So for me, you know, going into kind of like a soft, quiet space and creating and thinking about things and being quiet kind of is a part of my normal routine. It doesn't usually last longer than a month or so. So I'm starting to feel a little bit antsy and a little bit more like, I want to be creating again. I'm done with taking a break. but I've been really
Yeah.
lucky that I can continue making art in my home. And so I've been creating and working on projects at the Mill District that can be outside and there's no one else around. So I've really been productive, and I tend to create my own structure anyway throughout the day. So not having any structure is something I'm really familiar with. So it wasn't a huge adjustment. It was more just dealing with the collective. Very lucky, yeah. But you know, still being aware of the sort of collective anxiety and collective feeling of like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So I've still been producing work, but it's definitely felt different.
Yeah. I think that's such an interesting point, what this step back has kind of offered all of us, is to take a look at the ebb and flow of our habits. I experienced something very similar when all of this started. I think in an effort to help me through it, my brain kind of shut off its creative side. And I was really only able, I think for the first like 4 or 5 weeks, I was really only able to think administratively. What do I have to take care of? You know, tracking data, taking care of tasks that were assigned to me. Like my brain went into full sort of operation mode. And I freaked out a little because I don't consider myself an artist per se, the way you're talking about. And so I've not been as accustomed to the ebb and flow. It's very much just been woven into everything. And I never reflected on what is required for my brain to be creative. So you feel like when you talk with other artists, or when you talk with people who don't consider themselves artists, are there ways that you suggest tapping into the creative brain, or, you know, being gentle with it, whatever it takes to help sort of lubricate the creative process? Are there tricks that not tricks, but like ways that you have found a pathway in that helps you navigate it sometimes?
There are definitely, yeah. I think you use a really good word when you say gentle. I think it's really important, especially with what we're living through now. I think being gentle with whether it's your own judging mind, whether it's your own creativity, whether it's how you act to other people. I think being gentle is something that's so important when we're in this period of total uncertainty. Like we so rely on certainty as human beings. I think, especially in our culture, we're so dependent on knowing where things are going, what's going to happen, how much money I'm going to have, where I'm going to be. We're so dependent on that. And I am too. And so it's sort of the feeling of uncertainty that this brings up, I think can trigger a lot of emotion, both negative and positive. So I think like being gentle with yourself is really important while you deal with sort of what that brings up, maybe feelings that you've never felt before. In tandem with that, when you feel things you've never felt before, I think that can be really good juice for creativity, because it's sort of like, what do I do with this? And what are all these emotions? And I haven't seen my mom in 7 weeks and I miss her. And what does that feel like? You know, like, so I think that can really help sort of stimulate a creative process. That being said, if you don't feel like making any art, don't make any art. Like I feel like it's really important to also be like, I've spoken to artist friends who are like, I haven't done anything during this period. All these people have these like hashtags create in quarantine. All these people are doing these things and I'm not able to do anything. And I think it's really important to see that as a valuable experience as well. Like if you don't feel like doing it and you feel too overwhelmed, don't do it. And if you can, carry that with you when things return to kind of normal, because we all have different ways that we use our creative energy. I do think that even if you're not an artist, doing some kind of creative process or some kind of hobby, or even just like playing with something you're really bad at, is so important for the brain and to like alleviate anxiety and kind of help just give, like sometimes I don't feel like painting and I'll just sit down with some brushes and some color and be like, I'm just gonna make like some garbage, who cares, you know, I'm just gonna do whatever. I start to feel better. I notice like an actual somatic sensation of calming down, of getting focused, so I think even if you don't think you're an artist, and I think artists has this like kind of stigma attached to it of like, if you're going to sit down and be an artist, you have to like make something amazing.
Right.
And it's like, you can sit down and just like play and just experience what that feels like in your body and how that helps you kind of chill out and what might come up because of that. I think that's a really important thing to play with that we don't really give enough credit in our society.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And not just for artists, but for anyone. I mean, I know my tendency to try something or do something that I don't think I'm good at is very low. I struggle with that, and we can attach all different, labels to it, perfectionists or OCD or whatever it is. But sometimes it's just that feeling of, for me, my time is limited. I want to do things that I know I'm good at. And that can be sometimes from branching out. And so I think it's such a good point to almost make yourself do it. We just talked about being gentle, which is like the opposite of making yourself do it.
Make yourself do it, but be gentle about it. Or just like, go into it gently with like no expectations. Like, I'm just going to experiment and just like see what happens. I'm not going to force myself to do it. If I don't feel like doing it, I'm not. But hey, you know what? I'm not really in the mood, but I'm going to see what happens. That can sometimes be like a really cool artistic session that you have with yourself because you're just like, there's no stakes,
Yes, you don't have to show anybody.
You could throw it out if you want, whatever. It's yours. It can also bring like a really cool feeling of autonomy when you can just like make something for yourself. Like, I'll make things that I won't ever even put on the internet. I'm not going to sell them. It's just for me because I need that little like quiet time with myself to just create stuff that no one's ever going to see it.
Yeah. That's so awesome. That's very liberating, I feel like.
I should practice what I preach. I do that rarely because I'm usually busy with commissions and stuff, but I do think it's an important practice.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think that's so cool. So you grew up in North Amherst, right?
I grew up in North Amherst. I grew up like right a 30-second drive from the Mill District in the Pioneer Valley co-housing, which people have probably heard of in Amherst. So I grew up there and went to Amherst High, but then kind of dropped out of Amherst High and then like went to GCC, which I loved. I love GCC. I can't say enough good things about them. Like Greenfield Community College. I'll do anything for them. I love them. They kept me in high school. Like I love Greenfield Community College. And then I did my undergrad in Montreal in Quebec. Lived there for 5 years. Then did a bunch of art history, drawing study in Italy, and which was awesome. Really, I like studied, but I just like ate pasta and gelato for 8 months.
Very eat, pray, love.
It was very eat, pray, love. And then I lived in New York City after that for several years. They all meld into one just weird city lifetime. And then I moved back here like 5 years ago almost.
Wow. I didn't realize that it was that recent that you moved back.
Yeah.
What has been your experience coming back to the Valley, and also especially since the Mill District is located in North Amherst? I'm so curious, like, what has been your experience to come back and see how much places have changed and things have grown? I know that really struck me when I moved back 2.5 years ago, and I was like, wow, there's so much that's similar. I grew up in Northampton, but so much has changed.
Yeah, it was like so much has changed and almost nothing has changed at the same time. Like it was such an interesting sensation. And I think like Amherst as a town felt very similar to me and also felt very kind of like constricting because it was like, oh my God, this is where I grew up. I've lived in New York City and now I'm moving back. Like I had such a hard time letting go of my identity as a New Yorker. Like I was so tied up with like being a New Yorker and what that meant and how I acted and how I dressed. Like I was like really having a little imposter syndrome there with like, it's like identity as place and place as identity, And so it took me a while. It probably took me like 2 years to really accept that I was going to live here and that I was, I got involved with really cool organizations in Holyoke. I had a studio in Holyoke for a little while, and then was kind of always involved with the Mill District because I worked at Bread and Butter when they were still there, and had been involved with Cinda and I did like a giant mural for the Mill District before that barn's now unfortunately been knocked down, but before that barn was knocked down. And so I really started to slowly sort of realize that this was a cool place to live, and there was a lot of things happening here, and there were a lot of arts initiatives that were awesome, and the community was small enough that there was a lot of crossover, a lot of people knew each other, people really support each other, and that was something, the artist community here is something that I've like come to really, really love and really value. And then it kind of spreads, you know, like it goes from like micro to macro. Like my little tiny artist community in Cottage Street is like me and my studio mate on the 5th floor, and then we have artists on the 5th floor, and then, you know, so we're all kind of a community, and then it goes out to greater East Hampton. We have the Paragon, we have Eastworks, we're all kind of involved in East Hampton stuff, and then we have crossover with Northampton artists, Florence artists, with the Arts and Industry Building, and so it's just this sort of cool little like ripple effect of all these artists who acknowledge each other, which like, and then bringing North Amherst into it and Holyoke into it, it gets a little bit larger, but everybody kind of knows each other, supports each other, influences each other. Whereas in New York City, it just felt impossible, and like there's just so much more sort of what you have to be like, the zeitgeist, who do you know, what galleries are you in, that just started to get really overwhelming. And so being back here, it's, as an adult and really accepting that I'm here and diving in and being involved in projects, and especially community art initiatives, I really like. I think it's like outside art, community art, collaborations are something that really feed me as an artist. And so, you know, seeing the Mill District, like I remember when I was a kid, my dad and I would go to Roosters, and we would like drive by Cowls and go get waffles, and there was nothing there. You know? Like, and so going to the Mill District now is like, it's like, oh my God, there's these really gorgeous buildings and landscapings, and sort of integrated with these old barns, and so much history. Like I think something that Cinda and Evan do really well is really articulate the history of that as well, while kind of going modern. So I think it's so cool. I think it's really cool. It looks like a real live cool space.
I know,
which
right?
is like mind-blowing that it's in tiny little North Amherst, you know?
Yes, I know, it is so awesome. It's so awesome. I'm so glad it feels that way. I'm seeing people jump on, which is so exciting. So Jason Metcalf's watching. Hi, Jason. Also another Amherst, North Amherstite with Northfire Studios, which is an amazing recording studio located very close to the Mill District. And Ivy J. Mabius is on, and she says, Amherst artists unite, which I love. Thank you, Ivy. So true. And she also has this experience. She lives part of the year in New Orleans. And so I moved back from Philly, Ivy in New Orleans, you coming back from New York. There really is this trend of artists who kind of fan out from the Valley and come back again, either to live or to visit and share their art. And it really, you talked about collaboration, which I think is an awesome segue into talking about the mural project that you're starting, because one of the things that we've talked a lot about in the Mill District is highlighting authors and illustrators who live in the Valley, living authors, living illustrators. There happened to be this amazing community in the Pioneer Valley. And so as we started talking about highlighting that work and thinking about different ways to bring mural art, public art into the Mill District to keep weaving together, like you're saying, these new buildings, new developments, history, and also the presence of the artists, you and I talked a lot about having local artists paint different authors and illustrators for the mural. And we're just getting this project started. And that's one of the things that I love about it, is this idea that we can connect the practices of different people through a mural that's going to kind of highlight these two different art-related communities in tandem. So can you talk a little bit, like when you start a project, any mural project, where does your brain go and how do you kind of get all of it into that painting? That seems so hard to me.
Yeah, it is. You're asking me to like share the inner workings of my brain. I'm not sure you want me to do that on the on
Did I
live
not tell
internet.
you that's what this was about? Sorry.
I think something about mural projects that are so, I mean, I'm a painter. I'm a watercolor, oil. I paint a ton of different kinds of things. I do abstract, I do representational, I do landscape, but I'm trained as a painter. I have a BFA in painting, like that's my,
Right.
and then I kind of transitioned to mural work because there were a lot more opportunities. And it's really cool to see your work in public and see other people seeing your work and see people watching you make the work. Like for me, that's what making art is about. Like it's a connecting thing, and it's people are just like more likely to, I like talking to strangers too. Like that's something I also really like to do. And so people are really more likely to like come up and talk to you if you're working on a project because they feel like, you know, they're allowed to. Which is like they kind of are, you know, you're out in public, it comes with the territory, you know what you're doing, and people are really, really curious. They're really curious. Anyone that no one has ever, well, maybe one or two like people, but no one has ever said anything to me like, I don't like what you're making, or you're defacing that wall, or you're, you know, people are generally always super excited to have art in their community, want to know what I'm painting, want to know why, and it's just this like really cool connector, which is why I think it's really cool to have all of these art things going on in the Mill District, especially if we have a collaboration of other artists. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. You asked me my process. So in doing mural work, the most challenging thing I find is the scale. Like you can make a design, I'll like make a design and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then I'm gonna do this and then I'm gonna do that. And then I get out there and I look at the wall and I'm like, we're not doing any of that because that's insane. And I'll have to get scaffolding and I'll have to get like a parachute. And you're just like, so it really was a learning curve for me to be like, keep it simple. You can't actually like do these huge elaborate things, and actually simple translates better to large scale work, you know? So that is something that has been a challenge and also been really interesting of sort of like, okay, how do we work with the scale and the subject and what we have? And so like the mural that I did a few years ago for Cinda was like on a giant barn, and I did have scaffolding, and you know, so that was a good learning experience too, of like actually how much manpower, time does it really take? Because when you look at a wall, it doesn't look as big as when you're painting a wall. Like, you know,
you get real close to it.
Yeah, you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, that'll be like whatever. And then you start painting and you're like, oh my God, this is huge. So I've really gotten better about like honing in my designs and really like giving people an accurate estimate of how much time something is going to take. And so that's probably the first process, is like, okay, what is the scale of this? What does this feel like? Usually I have to actually go to the place and look at it and stand next to it and like touch it. And then you can start to be like, okay, this is what it's going to feel like to work on this. We want this many feet done. This is how much time that's going to take. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And I have more questions, so I can just keep digging, which is great. You're being such a good sport about this. Because what it makes me think of when we get into talking about public art is how front and center public art and the sort of experience and necessity of being outside right now. Because one thing that has really shifted in my world, and I'm sure in your world too, is that all indoor space has been sort of taken away from us for the time being. So for example, one thing I was really looking forward to was opening Hannah's gallery or early summer, which you and I have talked about a lot. And it will still open in the future. And it will be a local artist gallery where artists are able to rent space to show their work. But then also the sort of ulterior motive was to create a space where artists could come together with one another, talk about art as a livelihood, art as a practice, and then also share their art making with the community in different ways. So having pop-up classes, having artists working on different parts of their practice, everything from the business side of things to the art making itself on a webcam that we could share digitally with people. And as soon as that space was taken away from me, I had to totally rethink how I was going to continue to connect with artists, continue to connect artists with one another, and continue to connect artists with the community. And so all of a sudden, art outdoors is kind of the, you know, the theme of the day. So in addition to public art, what are some other ways that you're finding or trying to discover to continue connecting with other people, so it doesn't just turn into you kind of holed up in your studio as the weather gets nicer? I mean, what other ways can we make sure we're continuing to show work, to connect people's work with the people who want to appreciate it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really good question. And it's a question that I'm not sure I know the answer to. I think we're all kind of learning this transition of like, okay, first of all, we're all realizing how much we like to spend time with each other. I think that's really happening. Or how for granted maybe we take these spaces where, you know, like I miss going out to eat. I never even really went out to eat that much. I just want to go have someone else make me a drink, have some food, you know, like, and I think I kind of took that for granted. I've worked in the service industry forever. I'm always around restaurants, you know, they're just always been a part of my life. I love to eat, I love to drink. And so I was like, this is weird to not have this space to go to. And then that kind of seeped into, it's weird to not go to my studio. It's weird. I was supposed to have a show in April that got canceled, and then we were going to have it in May and that got canceled. And so it's like, Open Studios was canceled, which is a huge time where I interact with people. People come in and see the studio, see my work. We all hang out as a building together. That was canceled. These things started to happen where I started to realize how important these spaces are for me. And then there's this shift to trying to think of, okay, well, how is there a way to get that sort of need met? And I think the answer is yes and no. Like, I think that the no answer is that art, but even just human to human connection and talking is really energetic. Like, we are humans who like to feel how another person feels. There's a real, you know, the way someone smells, the way someone, you know, it's like that is a real thing that humans need. I think about little kiddos who can't go to kindergarten anymore and are like missing out on being touched by other kids, and you know, it's like those kids are gonna have something to deal with, you know, as they grow up in a world where they've missed out. So I think it's like you can't really replicate that. On the flip side, I do think that humans are incredibly resilient and we're incredibly adaptable. So we then are like, okay, we got to pivot and shift. So, okay, I have social media because I'm an artist and it's important, but I do not enjoy it very much. I feel like I shouldn't even say that because it's such a tool that is so great. And I like have social media shame. And I'm on Facebook Live right now, so they're probably like tisk. But I've really stepped up my social media. I mean, I post on Instagram. It's a way I've sold work that way because it's like a way that people can see into my studio, a way that we can continue this connection. And there have been really cool initiatives happening, like Pulp Holyoke, I think that's their Instagram handle, is doing this like envelope art exhibition, totally virtual, where people are like drawing on envelopes and then sending it to them, and they post on Instagram, and they're doing so, and that's been really cool. Like, everybody who's involved in it, we're seeing each other's envelopes, and it's actually expanded beyond just Western Mass. But most of the people who are involved in it are people I know. And so, and there have been tons of other initiatives like that. Galleries have gone virtual, museums have gone virtual, like museums are offering art history classes, you know, things like that, in just this kind of like desperation to continue some sort of artistic expression and connection. Which is why I think coming back to outdoor art, it's like that at least is something where we can stand far apart, we can experience it. You can have lunch at a picnic table and see it. I can have lunch at that same picnic table a few hours later and see it. We can take pictures of it and post it on social media or text it to each other or share. You know, I've never been on my phone as much as I've been on my phone in the past 2 months. And it's like, it kind of drives me crazy, but at the same time, I still need the connection. I still want to share with people
Yeah.
and talk about things. And so I think the social media platforms and initiatives that museums and galleries are taking is really helping sort of maintain that, just that conversation. And
Yeah.
I think public art and outdoor art, especially as the days get warmer, is a really cool way to provide some kind of community environment without, you know, if you think about going to a restaurant, you maybe are just talking to the person that you're with, but you're still experiencing everyone else who is there. You're still
Right.
having this like collective intimate experience. Eating is so intimate. And so
Yeah.
when you're in a gallery, you usually have that too. You're like having some free wine, some cheese, like that's fun.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at art together, which is also a really connecting, intimate experience. And so without those spaces to go, I think the shift to outdoor art can kind of help perpetuate that a little bit as we move forward to seeing what these spaces are going to feel like.
Yeah, I think those are such good points. And I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to encourage anyone watching, if you have questions, please put some questions up. We're happy to answer your questions. I see Angela DiTerlizzi's on. Hi, Angela. It's so nice to have you. And I
You don't
love
have to ask me about
everything.
art. You can ask me about anything you want.
Yes, you can ask her about anything. She's an open book. She's already here. No going back now. But I think all the points
I just really
that
shot myself in the foot there.
You opened that door.
I did.
I think I really love the point that you're making, because one thing for me in the Mill District, and I think I actually brought this up in another one of these episodes, but this whole thing has really made me think differently about how social media and the sort of digital online platforms can actually interact more with in-person gatherings and situations. Because, you know, when we think about there being public art, let's say when you're when the first part of your mural gets installed and you're working on it, people are going to be able to come see it and enjoy it, but for the next sort of undetermined amount of time, we still have to keep a fair amount of social distance. We have to be wearing masks. When you and I were working yesterday, you know, we both had masks on, and there has to be a certain sort of step back. So what you were mentioning about the freedom that people feel to walk up to you and ask questions and talk, a lot of people aren't going to feel that freedom right now. And so one thing that I want to make sure of as we're doing more public art, or as we're considering installing a story walk, or we're considering you know, creating a virtual Hannah's gallery for the time being so we can start showing people's work, I want to also include with that maybe some online spaces where people do feel comfortable connecting and talking about the art, so that we don't lose all of that conversation that is meant to happen when people look at art together. So I'm curious kind of what, as you say, you're using social media more, do you find that it's actually being woven together in different ways with how you're having in-person experiences? And if maybe that hasn't happened yet, but as you think about working on this mural in the Mill District, and continuing to engage with people, what do you envision as a way that we in the Mill District can help facilitate your connection to people seeing your work?
That's a good question.
I know, I'm making you like really.
I'm like, you didn't prepare me for this. I think, you know, I've really kind of had to like step up my game and learning really how to interact on social media and how sort of successful that can be. So I've been kind of scrambling, and I've started to get a hang on it. And I've also been really reliant on just being able to speak to someone or go to somebody's studio or chat with them. And so I've been using social media a lot more and sort of like sharing other people's work. And when we sort of first went into lockdown, when we were all kind of in panic mode about it, there were so many like posts and stories going around Instagram of local artists sharing other local artists' work, and then all these sort of like chain reactions of tag 7 artists that you know, tag 7 artists that you know. There was this real sort of like push, which felt awesome, honestly, that like all these people who I kind of know or know really well, but we're all in the same circle, just really trying to do this push to support each other, and this kind of like, I've got your back, you've got my back kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'd never experienced that on like social media before, and so that was really cool. And I think commenting on other people's work, or just like if someone's like, I don't feel like creating right now, sort of like, hey, that's okay, me neither, you know, or and so that's been a really nice way to interact, and how that kind of translates. Another thing I think, which I'm kind of excited about for this mural project, especially as we get more authors and more artists involved, I think it's a really cool little mini like showcase of people. And so as people come to the Mill District, maybe I'm not working on it, or maybe I am and they're, you know, standing 12 feet back from me, but taking a picture, and maybe, you know, we'll come up with a hashtag for the mural project or something, and then people can either write questions on that or hashtag that, so that then they have a way of kind of interacting with the piece, even though we can't interact with each other yet. I think that will be a cool way to kind of get a conversation started about it and answer some questions, and, you know, somebody can be like, I hate that green, and we'll make it blue, you know, like that's cool too.
We take all feedback.
I take all suggestions, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And I mean, I think as we keep moving forward with the mural, you and I will probably continue to look for ways that people can feel like they are really interacting with it, and interacting with you, and interacting with other artists and authors who get involved, which is exciting. It's fun to be sort of starting something up, and it is, you know, I mean, I do feel like we're sort of past the initial like, oh my God, and now we're getting into the space of like, well, we're just going to do it. We're just going to start this project.
How
we're
can
just
we make
reach
this
out.
work?
Yeah,
definitely.
It's so exciting. Oh, Eva's on. Hi, Eva. So no one has put any questions up. So
because I really covered everything. I gave all the information anybody needed to know.
Yeah, everything we needed to know about art and your childhood.
You got it all now.
Oh, that's so wonderful. So let's see, I'm trying to think of one good question to finish up with, but I also want to give you space if there's anything that you want to share or have been thinking a lot about. Feel free to like jump in with anything. But I think I'm so curious about how, as you've gotten back into life in the Valley and into the arts community, I think one thing that a lot of people in the art sector in the Valley think about is ways to really continue to connect these different pockets of arts communities to one another across towns, across counties. I know as we develop Hannah's Gallery, one of the things that was important to us was really bringing artists out, especially from the hill towns, especially towns where I feel like a lot of artists don't get visibility, or even people don't consider themselves artists, going back to what we were talking about. So anything that you have found, or spaces you have found to be especially connecting and helpful in getting different groups to come together? That's a huge question, I know.
I think that there's always a need for more of that. I think there are spaces like that, you know, like outdoor spaces come to mind, like Art in the Orchard. I don't know, I'm sure maybe people know about that, but that's in East Hampton. And there's like sculptures, and a lot of people come from all over for that. Different artists are involved in that. Camille's been involved in that, I think, who also has done stuff for the Mill District. Camille Peters is an amazing artist. And so I think that there's always a need for more of that. I think there's a little tendency for communities to be unintentionally a little insular, just because I know Cottage Street can be that way a little bit. Like, we all know each other, we're all comfortable with each other, we do our open studios, and we go to other people's open studios, but there's not a lot of crossover that happens. And, you know, there are spaces like Map Space in Eastworks, which is run by the East Hampton City Arts Council, which is really good about having artists from elsewhere come in, but also is really focused on East Hampton artists. I think each community focuses on their own artists and uplifting them, because art is such a community-based thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's also such a human thing that it's really, I think, important to like keep it within your community and uplift those people in your community, but also bear in mind that art and art creation and just experiencing art is such a human thing that I feel like it can also really sort of permeate all of these areas. And so having spaces that have a bunch of communities come in and join with each other, I think can be really rich.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love the idea of, if, you know, Hannah's Gallery is in the Mill District, you have a show that's like, you know, Sunderland artists or super local artists and lift those up. And then you have another show where you reach out to Springfield, Holyoke, Greenfield. I mean, there are amazing artists in this sort of valley outside of Western Mass even, that are creating really amazing work. There are studios in Holyoke, like the Baustein Building. There are artists in Greenfield who have their own house studios. I mean, there are people who are making really cool work. And I think providing different hubs where they become known places where people can go and like experience artists within their micro community, and then also can talk to and meet and experience artists where they might not, because maybe you're not going to drive down to Springfield and go to a show. Maybe you're not going to go. Maybe you're like, I don't feel like driving to Holyoke. I'm guilty of that all the time, although I do anything to go anywhere these days. But I think we really can fall into this kind of like, I'm just going to do where I am because I'm busy. And so having spaces where you bring other artists in from just a little bit further beyond your outreach, and then having some place like that at the Mill District be kind of this like cultural hub is super exciting to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I so appreciate your willingness to come on here and really just be open to the conversation. And it's really fun to talk to you like this and just get to learn a little bit more about your history.
Yeah, it's weird to know people are listening to me. I didn't swear one time, which I thought was
didn't swear. I didn't swear either.
No, I know. We did a really good job.
We did a great job. But this has been so wonderful, and I'm excited to, like you say, keep bringing more and more artists and practitioners to the Mill District. You mentioned some great places, and I also, in my research and development of Hannah's Gallery, have had an opportunity to discover so many places like Leverett Crafts and Arts, North Common Arts, all of these different groups. And so for anyone who is watching right now or will be watching later, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, find out more about the mural project that Arielle is just starting and different ways to get involved. Find out more about Hannah's Gallery. We're also going to be doing other public art around the Mill District and also putting some cool stuff in the woods that you can go find, story walks and different sculptural stuff. So you can follow everything that we're doing on Facebook, because we are just really turning our attention right now to the outdoors and any space that we can enjoy safely and at our leisure. And then we will also, out of this conversation, continue considering ways that we can also have that conversation piece around all the art. And that will probably happen online, and we'll just keep weaving those things together. So Arielle, you're amazing. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. You're amazing. It's so fun.
Thanks. Yeah. Anything else you want to say before I sign us off and you get to go back to your day?
I think that's it. If you're in North Amherst, check out the mural, check out the art. I know we're putting in some other sort of outdoor things like a mechanical horse, more on that later, some more furniture and benches and things like that in the next coming weeks. So like, I think it's so cool that like the Mill District is sort of this ever changing like art show also, just being out there. If you go this week, it might look different than if you go next week. And so it's kind of a fun thing to check in on if you're local and if you're in that area. And if you see me out there painting, come say hi, shout at me from 6 feet. I'm into that. Yeah. Take some pictures, whatever.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. You are fantastic.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Bye.